So yeah, I mean, since this is an Ask Me, this is an AMA, and I guess I'm the person with answers today. I can only really speak from my perspective and kind of what's helped me. So I think for me, I've been able to kind of go through those levels at a company like Headspace, starting off as a kind of mid-level designer and then slowly graduating into a senior role and then a lead role. And for me, the one big trait has been flexibility in adapting to what the company needs at the time that it needs it. And so, and sometimes it's a little bit different than what I thought, my career path would look like. But in the end, it's all kind of, it's been a little bit of a maze going through it. But I feel like I've landed in a few really good spots. Um, Another, I guess, would be um, just sort of being a very proactive communicator, um, especially when you're younger in your career. You can tend to kind of really focus on the tasks that you're working on, which is really great. But as you kind of progress, having that ability to come out of that, zoom out a little bit, and be proactive in communicating and sharing like the process, the thoughts, the insights, bringing people in to that process with you, your engineers, your copywriters, your product manager, all the other kind of cross-functional people who you might work with. That's been a really big unlocking thing for me. And then I guess this is the part that I think a lot of designers will not like is to try to bridge the gap between yourself and your product managers. Try learn a lot about business, like learn as much as you can about business. And I mean, it sounds for a lot of designers, they did not get into design for purposes of business. But I promise you, the more you learn, the more you understand what's going on, and the more you can be effective in applying your skills to those challenges, to those goals. Um, yeah, I think that's maybe the top three that I can think of. All right, so the setup we have, I mean, it does change when we find new things. So it's some kind of combo, I guess, between Figma on the design side, Jira on the product management side, a little bit of Notion for documentation, um, Box. We used to use Dropbox, but we use Box now. I think because there's some security things. Our IT team was very excited about Box. Um, Using that for storage. But to be honest, if we're working in Figma, we hardly ever use Box. We mostly use it for yeah, just for saving
Mm.
archives of things. Um, of course, Slack for team chat, Zoom for webinars and conferences, pencil and paper for the sketching and the sprinting, all that good stuff. Um, let's see. Yeah, I don't know if there's a perfect way to have them all work together, though I've seen, there's a tool called Miro that we've been using while we're doing remote sprints, which have
Yeah,
some really
it's
nice,
so popular in the past weeks. That's amazing.
great, it has some
Yeah.
really nice sprint kind of starter kits where there's like a template that allows you to like kind of follow the sprint process throughout. It's very nice. And someone showed me the other day that you can actually do video calls within Miro. So on the board itself, you have the little thumbnails. So that way you're not switching between sort of Zoom and the board, and then you're
Yeah.
unmuting, you're muting. That can be
Yeah.
a little tricky, especially as you're working from home, and some of us have you live with roommates, partner, whatever. So you don't want to be unmuted all the time. Well, I was thankful enough to be sort of graduated into a lead role. So I've never been a new lead joining, but if I was a new lead joining, what I would do is try to talk to as many people as possible. The people above you, below you, adjacent to you that you'll be working with, and just ask a lot of questions. Ask for context. Ask for history. Um, what's important in this company? What are some things that we've done in the past that have worked well? What are some things that have not worked well? Just go like very deep and kind of wide on a lot of different topics and questions. And that should help you be much more informed when you're kind of, making decisions in the future. I think a mistake a lot of people make joining companies is not asking enough questions and kind of coming in with their opinions or their thoughts, which is, is why you were hired. Which, you made it through the interview process, so you've got something good going there. But it's a very quick way to I don't know, sort of disengage your team, to come in a little bit too hot, a little bit too, not to say like don't be passionate and don't have opinions, but definitely like keep your ears open for a little while before being, kind of too bold. Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a good point, and I think you can see that happening in real life by, opening up Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, and visually they're all like quite basic looking, definitely complex platforms, but you compare that to what you might find on a website like Dribbble, where sort of everything's animated, everything's super slick, the text is in gray and I can hardly read it, and it's really small font and things like that, but looks really good and very attractive, because it's kind of designed, I don't know, it looks sort of premium or something, or highly visual. I think you need to lean on the data, the analytics. Those things don't lie. They do also show you one side of the coin, so maybe doing some more like user kind of interviews and things like that while you're working on this, just to balance that out a little bit. I do think you can get somewhere in the middle where you're able to kind of hit those important metrics and have the website still be, or the app still be accessible, but looking really good and functioning really well. We use some tools. One of them is Contrast. There's another one called Stark, and those are really good for like color contrast. And lately we've been using that at Headspace to modify our whole kind of brand color system. So making sure that whatever we have on screen is highly accessible, legible, because it can be very tempting to design something that looks really slick, but when put into practice, is actually like more difficult to use or unclear. But yeah, it's always this tension between the kind of clear and obvious and kind of cool and innovative. So when I first started at Headspace, we would have members and kind of non-members come into the office every 2 weeks. It was usually on a Friday afternoon, and we would literally show prototypes to them, show it in front of them, get their feedback, get their reactions. I think there was a bit of a this was many years ago, but there was a bit of a I don't know what to, like a wow factor of like, you're at the Headspace office and you use the app and you like it, and it's, there was an aura about being there that I think was not giving us the kind of feedback we needed. So we switched to using a platform you're probably familiar with, which is usertesting.com, and we've been using that for a few years to kind of gut check and validate some of our ideas or features. And like that's one part of it, because you can kind of really quickly put together a script and a testing plan and get that out to 10, 20, 100 people very, very quickly, and then review that later with your team. But another method we've used is to actually have interviews with people we know have engaged with certain aspects of the product. So we've been using still using user testing to conduct some of those interviews, and also doing some on our own just through reaching out to customers and over Zoom, but still having a really proper kind of Q&A format where we're hopefully not asking leading questions and biasing ourselves too much. But just like, you know, communication and listening, is that the theme of today? I guess so. And then there's so many things at your disposal, especially if you're a digital product that's live today. You know, interviewing your customers is one thing. If like Headspace, we get quite a bit of traction in the App Store, so we're able to see some of that. You know, we see that feedback coming in live all the time. There's also, you know, conversations on Twitter. Sometimes if you go digging through, you know, if I go digging through Reddit, I can find a lot of information that people have kind of dropped in there, you know, in the, not just in like a Headspace thread, but going through the sort of meditation and mindfulness corners of the internet. What else? We have a customer experience team who are very, very handy at, you know, we have a good system to be in constant contact with them, and they can filter up kind of concerns and issues and ideas and, you know, problems that users might be having. And, you know, hopefully those things being surfaced can then lead into, you know, new ideas and fixes for the product, for the roadmap, for the future.
Yeah, so listen to your customers. Again, it's amazing.
It's really, yeah, it's incredible how hard it is for people sometimes. And I think we tend, I don't know, maybe it's a designer thing or a product thing, but we tend to think we need to reinvent the wheel all the time, and that we need to, you know, you need to think of the biggest, best idea that's brand new, never been done before. But, you know, people's needs are, you know, sometimes pretty basic, and you can probably start with something really simple that sort of ticks that box for them, and, you know, do that first, and then, you know, innovate on top of that would be my advice. But also understanding that it's very hard to do sometimes in a large team. In the early stages of creating anything, you kind of want to have the discussion of what does success look like. You know, we've all been there. What's the metric? What's the thing we're chasing after? But, you know, the other side of that is, you know, how can we measure user satisfaction? Because you might hit the metric, but you might not be balancing that with, you know, with somebody who's actually happy to use your product. So I think both those things, setting that up in the beginning, and then as you're developing, iterating, hopefully you can kind of try this out in a few stages, you know, kind of the MVP format to like full feature. And hopefully you're tracking those things along the way. And if not along the way, then, you know, post-launch or again, back to the interviews side, like we sometimes do in-app surveys in Headspace where we will actually prompt a user after they've engaged with something, maybe a week after or 2 weeks after, or we'll reach out to them and just kind of have a conversation or collect a survey of some type to gauge what that sentiment is. Yeah, recently we've launched, you know, Headspace is most known for meditation, but we've also got a sleep category to kind of, you know, help you fall asleep. And recently we launched the Move tab, which is kind of fitness content and exercises and stretches and things like that. So we used to have some, like, you know, some kind of mindful stretching and things like that, and mindful like jogs and that in the app. But now we have kind of our own dedicated tab. So an example of that would be we saw some new kind of user behaviors, you know, on the data side that, you know, oh, this was interesting. This is like a little bit of a different way of using the product than maybe people were using the meditation. And that led us to conducting some interviews, having some conversations with people after, and sort of asking, you know, so when did you discover this? You know, what were your feelings on this? How did you kind of feel about Headspace offering that? do you have any, was there anything that really stood out as not great or great? How does this compare to some of the other things you might use for fitness? And gathering that information and comparing that to the usage behaviors, and hopefully leading us down the right path forward. Personalities can make a huge difference. I think for me, I've been on different teams with different product managers, and every single one of them, the relationship has been different. In some cases, I've had a product manager who really enjoyed wireframing and sketching. In some cases, I've had product managers who really would just kind of leave it to the designers to, come up with potential solutions. And I think building a good relationship with your PM, more often in the company, they will have more kind of power to dictate what moves forward. So, unless you want to bear that burden, which is a big one, and probably really difficult to do on top of designing things, building up that relationship is huge, just in like literally in a one-to-one kind of friendly way. A little bit kind of more than just kind of passive coworker, like just trying to be like with your PM, trying to be like the dynamic duo, like be the two parts that kind of come together and build something amazing. And if you can kind of keep that mentality and get there with your PM, I think that can be really effective. And I think leaning on each other's strengths. So if you're working with someone who does like to wireframe and does like to kind of do that pre-design work, we'll call it, just maybe trying to ask for a bit of time where you can collaborate together in that, so that they don't, your PM doesn't show up on Monday morning with the sketches all done, ready for you to put some interface on it. Trying to be more part of that process.